In this grimdark tutorial, we're painting the Carrion Lord, a towering ghoul chieftain exhumed from the plague pits beneath the hollow grove. If you crave darkness, decay, and detail, you're in the right place. Welcome back to Black Mantle Studios. We start with white primer because as grime, filth, and shadow build up, the figure darkens fast. A zenithal base might look great at first, but by the end, you're left with a model that's swallowed too much darkness. White keeps the details readable even under layers of decay. For the ground beneath him, we're using AK Terrain's dark earth. This textured paste gives you the look of soaked, corrupted soil. Perfect for the ruinous world the Carrion Lord rules. Apply it generously with a flat brush, pushing it into the surface like you're packing down graveyard mud. Vary the thickness as you go, leave some areas thick and cracked, others thin and scraped bare. Just avoid burying the feet too much, unless, of course, you want him to look half sunken and rot, which is equally horrifying. Once applied, speed up the drying with a blow dryer. But be warned, this stuff holds moisture like a corpse in a damped crypt. It may look dry on the surface, but underneath it's still soft. For best results, let it cure overnight before moving on to dry brushing or weathering. Next, we add the remnants of the Carrion Lord's victims, resin skulls, and femurs scattered across the ground like forgotten warnings. Each piece is glued down with thick superglue, but we skip the fast cure accelerator. That gives us just enough time to adjust the layout, nudging bones into more natural positions, like they've tumbled from a corpse heap or been kicked aside by a ghoul's heavy tread. The trick is to make the placement feel chaotic without being careless. Cluster a few, isolate one or two, and be mindful of the lines your eye will follow. You want it to look accidental, but with intent. Death isn't always tidy, but your design should be. With the terrain dry and resin bits locked in, we missed on a third layer of primer, this time customized. This coat tints the surface slightly, helping to unify the palette and push the figure towards a colder, ghastlier tone. For the Carrion Lord's flesh, we mix Army Painter's Brigade Gray with Pastel Seafoam Speedpaint 2.0. Then add a few drops of Warpaint's Retarder to keep the blend smooth and slow drying. The goal here isn't full opacity, it's a pale, almost spectral underpainting that sets the tone. Now we start blocking in the fabric, stained, tattered remnants of a life long forgotten. The base coat is Tundra Top. From Army Painter's Warpaints line, a solid earthy tone that gives us a dark, neutral foundation to work from. This is the lowest layer, meant to sink beneath grime and shadow like worn cloth soaked in filth. Once that's dried, we step up to Prairie Ochre. This muted yellow-brown is brushed over the raised areas, mainly the creases and folds of the pants. Use a controlled dry brush or edge highlight depending on how crisp you want the transitions. This step is about building midtones, subtle shifts in color that hint at the shape and wear of the garment. Finally, we move to Desert Yellow, carefully applying it to the highest ridges and sunlit edges. Think of where the fabric would catch the most light before being dragged through the mire. This tone will shine through the grime washes we add later, giving the cloth real visual depth when the model is on the table. It's a slow rise from shadow to light, one layer at a time, so that even the smallest details hold up under the corruption that follows. With the groundwork set, we coat the entire base, including the bones in satchel brown speed paint. This rich earthy tone immediately ties everything together under a blanket of decay. Vary the transparency as you go. Add water or speed paint medium to thin the pigment and create lighter zones where the mud is dry or worn thin. And let it pool darker in the crevices to mimic damp, sunken earth. Once that's dry, we return to the bones. Using ancient stone from Army Painter, pick out the skulls and femurs. There's no need to be too precise. Leave the lower halves in shadow. These remains have been trampled, soaked, and forgotten. Let them sink visually into the base. A little grime swallowing the detail here only adds to the realism. Finally, grab some mocha skin and dry brush the terrain texture. Focus on raised areas, stones, cracks, and edges, catching just enough light to define the shape. Now it gets fun. We're breaking out Goons Grime, an enamel wash from Villainy Inks, designed to drench your miniatures in pure decay. Load up the airbrush with several drops of Goons Grime and thin it slightly with mineral spirits, about a 4-to-1 ratio or even less. This stuff is potent and dark, and we will want that pale, ghoulish flesh we worked on earlier to show through the grime. Give the miniature a full, even coat. It should look like he just crawled his way out of a mass grave. Once you're happy with the coverage, grab a blow dryer and flash the solvents off. This step isn't just about speed. It sets the enamel so that it won't smear uncontrollably when we start working it back. Now comes the refining. Take a clean Q-tip and start removing grime from the raised areas. Shoulders, cheeks, brow ridges, knuckles. Roll the swab gently across the surface to lift away the excess. If you want to remove a lot, use a clean, dry Q-tip and rub gently. If you want more control, dab instead of swiping. And here is where it gets creative. Once the swab picks up grime, you can use it like a brush. Lightly dab or stipple it back onto the model to reapply grime in mottled patterns. Around joints, under the chin, inside elbows. This gives you a textured, unpredictable finish that looks natural and layered, like rot, building over time. The result? Flesh that's been aged by filth and exposure. No two models will ever look exactly the same. Now we introduce some tonal variation into the Carrion Lord's flesh, using Barren Dune, a dry, ochre-tinted hue from the Warpaint's range. This step adds life to the death, or rather, the illusion of decay in different stages. The splotches break up the uniformity of the base tone and hint at old bruising, sun damage, and decomposition beneath the skin. Don't overdo it. Less is more here. Load your brush lightly somewhere between a standard coat and a dry brush. You want just enough paint to create soft fanned edges that feather out into the surrounding tone. We're not painting clean lines, just discoloration. Focus on organic zones like the belly, the neck, the shoulder blades, or the upper arm. Think about places where blood might pool, where the sun might bake exposed skin, or where rot might take hold first. Tap the brush, then gently spread the paint upward with small circular strokes. Now we begin marking the Carrion Lord's wounds with carnelian skin, a deep, congealed red from the Warpaint's line. This isn't a highlight or a subtle tint. This is raw trauma. We're laying down the foundation for torn flesh, pus-filled ruptures, and the wet edges of open decay. Load your brush like normal, no dry brushing here. The paint should be thick enough to leave a strong impression, especially in areas where the body's been violated by infection or violence. Start by hitting random spots across the limbs and back. It's okay if the edges aren't perfectly feathered. We'll be layering enamels over this, which will blend and diffuse the harshness later. But there are key areas you must emphasize. Around the chest pustules, press the brush into the folds. These are swollen, angry wounds that should look painful even from a distance. Around the mouth, dab in a circular motion to simulate irritation, bleeding gums, or torn skin. Then move to the open gash on the upper right shoulder. This is one of the main focal points, so don't hold back. Lay in a thick swatch of carnelian to build that base of trauma. Finally, turn the model around and hit the large laceration on the back. This is the biggest rupture on the body, and it deserves a wide spread of deep red. The more dramatic this base coat is, the more effective our enamel and blood passes will be later on. Now we bring out Carrion Crimson from Villainy Inks, a cool, enamel-based red that contrasts beautifully with the warmer tone of carnelian skin. This is where the wounds start to come alive, or rather fester. Unlike the bold base coat we laid down earlier, Carrion Crimson is used for finesse, feathering, texturing, and adding depth to the trauma. Use a clean, fine-tipped brush and keep your layers thin. This ink is incredibly pigmented, so a little goes a long way. Gently glaze the edges of wounds, letting the cool red blend into the warmer centers. The result is a subtle halo of irritation, like inflamed skin or torn muscle just starting to rot. For the final enamel layer, we turn to Ichor of the Damned, a dark disease tone from Villainy Inks that brings everything together in a crescendo of rotten ruin. This enamel doesn't just stain, it haunts. It deepens the trauma, sinks into the wounds, and pushes the contrast to its absolute limit. Load a fine brush or detail swab and begin working the ichor into the deepest recesses. The corner of wounds, under the ribs, or along the spine. Let it bleed and feather naturally. You'll see it cling to the crevices, adding a rich, necrotic depth that makes the other reds feel wet and recent by comparison. But be careful. Ichor of the Damned is powerful. Don't draw on the reds you've already built. This isn't a wash for the whole model, it's a scalpel. Use it to carve out shadowy pockets of feathered bruising. Under the chin, behind the knees, deep in the chest gash. Places where light won't reach, but the rot will. To finish the wounds and bring contrast to the gore, we return to Ancient Stone by Army Painter, this time to highlight the pustules. This pale, sickly off-white gives the boils and blisters a swollen, infected look, like they're ready to burst under diseased skin. Use a fine brush and carefully pick out the tops of each pustule, just the highest points. These spots should catch the light and stand apart from the surrounding rot. Don't overdo it. This isn't a clean highlight. Think of it more like a glisten of pus or calcified skin rising from the wound. If this walkthrough brought your miniature to life or on death, consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it with your fellow warlords of rot.